Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Whether you're new to web development, new to Webpack, or you're just trying to figure out how to use the latest Webpack, or even if you don't know what Webpack is or what a module bundler is for that matter, then stick around. Today, we're going to start from scratch and make a basic website using Webpack as our module bundler. If you're curious to learn more about Webpack or you just want to check out some of their documentation, I'll leave a link for it in the description below. Now, I received some feedback in my last video about showing me creating some code rather than just showing code that I had completed earlier. But don't worry, today we're going to walk through this together step by step. So if you're not at your computer, feel free to pause this video and then come back to it when you're ready, because I'm going to move over to my computer and we're going to get started right now.
Okay, so now I'm here on my computer, and the first thing we're going to do is go through some of the prerequisites, assuming that we haven't installed anything that we would need to run something like this before. So first we're going to go ahead and open up our browser, and we're going to go for node.js.org. And then the first option we want here is, or the first one on the left here, is 12.16.1 LTS. This version may be different when you watch the video, maybe down the road, but generally what you want is one of these LTS versions, and as it says here, it's recommended for most users. So we're going to go ahead and click that. We're going to download it, and then we're going to run the installation. Alright, so then we want to hit next, and then change, next, and then tick this box here, and then next, change, and then this experience may vary just a little bit for you. I've already installed Node.js on my computer, so some of the prompts may some slightly different stuff, but the experience should be relatively the same. So this prompt window should pop up. I'm just hitting enter so that the script will run. Yes, and then it's going to go through a little bit more of some installation, and we just let that proceed. And we can hit enter to exit. And now we have Node.js installed. And the next thing we want to do is figure out where we're going to edit our code at. So you can certainly do this in something like Notepad++, and there's other text editors out there if you've ever written code before. But my preference, just for kind of ease of use and navigation through what we're going to be doing, my suggestion is going to be Visual Studio Code. So we'll go ahead and navigate to that address here, which is code.visualstudio.com/download. And then you can go to the user installer, and then in most cases you should be able to choose 64-bit for your machine. And then we'll go through our user setup here once this is done downloading. And then I've checked the create a desktop icon option here just so that it adds it to my desktop. This actually won't really change anything for me because I have this installed already, but I'm just kind of going through this so we can see what that looks like. Okay, cool. So you can go ahead and leave this checkbox ticked right here, because I already have it installed, and I'm just going to open up that one. And as you'll notice here, the icon here is blue for this case, and mine is green down here, my taskbar. The reason for that is just that there's two different versions. This one is just the regular Visual Studio Code. There's also a Visual Studio Insiders, which is kind of like a beta version where you can have access to early features and things like that. So I just I'm going to continue to use mine, but you can certainly check the box here and then hit finish, and I'm going to uncheck it, and then when you do, it'll launch VS Code for you. Alright, so I've got Visual Studio Code open, and I'm going to go ahead and get us started with a folder where we're going to work out of. So I'm going to click on File up here and go down to Open Folder, and then I'm just in where I want to put my code. You can put your folder that you're going to create wherever you want. You could make it on your desktop if you wanted to, but I'm going to create one here. Go to New Folder, and we're going to just call this First App. And then we're going to click on that folder and select folder. And so now we're working out of our first app directory. And then we're going to need to type in a bunch of different command prompt items. So what you can do to do that, and I'll put the keys for this on the screen, but you're going to hit Control and the tilde, and that'll bring up, and you can see it here in the window, or this should be what you see. In some cases you may have a welcome page that shows up here. You can just exit the welcome page, and then the background of VS Code should show these little shortcuts, and you'll see Control plus tilde, and it'll toggle the terminal. So if I hit it again, it'll make it go away, and then we can bring it back. So the first thing we need to do is create our npm project. To do this, we're going to do npm init-y, and -y is just telling it to accept all the default configuration options. Because we're not going to go step by step with that, we'll go through and edit this as we need. So I'm going to click here on the package.json file to open it, and it's got some very basic information in here. Next, I'm going to type out the different command that we need, or the things that we need to install for our application. And so in this case, we're using Webpack as our module bundler, so we're going to install the things that we need for Webpack. Alright, so I've typed out the command that we're going to use here, which is npm install, and then we have a space separated list of different dependencies that we're going to use. So as I said, we're using Webpack. Webpack CLI is just an extra part we need for Webpack, and then Webpack Dev Server, which we'll get into in a little bit, which will allow us to run the website locally on our computer. And then this --save-dev, which tells the project that we're going to save these as dev dependencies rather than regular dependencies, and we'll explain that going forward a little bit more. Then you can hit enter, and we'll come back when those are installed. Okay, now that we've done that, you can see that it's installed them under our dev dependencies, and the 3 different packages that we needed to install are now here in our dev dependencies. And we're going to need to add a few scripts here, so we can highlight and delete the scripts that's here. And we're going to add 2 of them. One is going to be called build. We're just going to put Webpack here. The next one will be start, and we're going to do Webpack dev-server-open. And then we're going to save that. And we'll get back to what we're going to use this for in a little bit. So from this point on, I'm going to create basically one file at a time as we kind of navigate through creating this. And once I've typed out the whole file, I'm going to kind of go through and explain what I've done in that file and you know what's important for those. So just know that going forward, I may create a file and then take a moment to type everything out in that file, and then I will review what I'm putting in that file and why after the fact. So the first thing I'm going to do is create our first folder here, and we're going to call it source, src. And then I'm going to right click on the source folder here and then do new file, and we're going to call that index.js. And now I'm going to go ahead and fill this out. Okay, so now that I've gotten this file typed out, I'm going to go through what's in here. So first we've got a function. I've just called it div element, and in here we're creating a div element and then assigning its inner HTML property to the string hello world and then returning the element. So the equivalent to this, just so you can understand what it would look like if we were in an HTML document, I'm just going to put a comment here in this code, and the way we add a comment is doing a double /, and this just makes it so that we can write out notes or comments and descriptions for things that we're writing in our code. And so this is just going to be a way I can easily illustrate what that would look like. So if we were to add a div tag in HTML, this is what that would look like. And so this function is just creating that inside of the HTML file that we'll have later. Then we have the document.body, which is saying on the body property of our HTML document, we want to append our div element that we're creating here in this function. So now that we've done that, we can hit save. And now that we have that saved, we're going to go ahead and do our first Webpack build. So we'll go down here, we'll click into our command prompt line and do npm run build, which will run Webpack, because Webpack does support a 0 configuration option. In this case, we're going to have to end up adding our own config because their no configuration option is a bit limited. But just so you can kind of see what happens, it'll output our bundled file here with all the JavaScript that we wrote, all minified and bundled up here in this one file. But we're going to need to do a bit more of advanced configuration, and so we're going to go ahead and add our Webpack config file. And then we're going to go ahead and add some of the stuff that we need for this file. And then once I'm done typing everything out for this file, as we did before, I'll go ahead and explain everything that's in it. Okay, now that I've got everything filled out here, we'll go through some of the stuff that's in here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as it is. And so I've added in some of the different dependencies or things that we need to require, which is why we have these requires here for this configuration. So the first thing here is target, which is actually web by default, so we don't actually need to include this here if we don't want to, but I just wanted to be explicit and kind of explain that you can set target to a bunch of different things depending on the type of project you're doing. But since we're doing a website in this case, we can just have web. The next one is going to be mode development. We would change this if we were actually deploying to a production website, but we're not in this case, so we'll leave that as development. Then DevTool inline source map. This just allows for what's called debugging later on, which we're not going to really go over too much in this video. Dev server, and then content base as dist, which is the folder where our output is going, and this is what's going to allow us to run our website locally on our machine. And then our entry point, so we're just telling it, hey, we're going to use that index file that we typed up as our entry point or the starter point for our application. And then we have to tell the bundle and where all that needs to go. So we have our output, and we're setting the file name to bundle.js in this case, and then our path and where it's going to go. So we're telling it to go to the dist folder, and then the public path here is just this / for the root directory. Then we've got these plugins that we pulled in up here. So clean Webpack plugin just cleans our dist folder out every time we run it, and then HTML Webpack plugin is going to generate our HTML file for us based on some configuration that it has. But unfortunately, we haven't pulled these two packages in yet, so we're going to go ahead and do that part next so that it'll work when we run it. So to do that, we need to add some more dev dependencies. So we're going to type in npm install, and then we'll do our save dev, because they are dev dependencies. And then we want HTML Webpack plugin, and then clean Webpack plugin. We'll let those install. All right, now that those are done installing, we can go ahead and run it. We'll do npm run build, and we can see that it's run everything, and it's output our bundle.js file. And because clean Webpack ran, the main.js file that was here before got cleaned out, and our new bundle.js file is here, and then our index file is here as well, which has automatically had our bundle file included, and then that title development that we had inside of our config file was added into the HTML file as well. But now we want to be able to see this in a browser. So we're going to go ahead and take advantage of the script that we had earlier. So if we go back here to our package.json, we added this start script, which is then going to call this Webpack dev server open function, and open is just going to tell the browser to open when it runs. So we're going to come down here to the command prompt, and we're going to type in npm run start, and then we'll hit enter. And now that browser is open for me. I have multiple monitors, so for me this actually opened up off screen, but I pulled it up here for you, and you can see that the browser has opened, and we unfortunately have nothing here. So let's go fix that. Okay, so actually it looks like we have a typo, so we'll actually use this as a great example here. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of open this back up. So we'll see, as we pointed out, there's nothing here, and I'm just going to minimize my browser. And I've had a spelling error here, and so we have the function called div element up here, and I've typed in dev element here. And so we're going to replace this with the correct spelling. And then as soon as I save this, or actually I'm not going to save it just yet, so if you focus down here when I go to save this, you'll notice that because we're running the dev server, it automatically reruns and compiles the files again. And then if we open up the browser, we can now see that our hello world text is actually here. And so that's kind of the neat thing, is you can save your files, and it will, while you're running this dev server, it will continue running and compiling the code for you so that you can see the changes represented in your browser as you're moving along, which is really neat. The next thing we're going to do, because we don't just want some text on the screen, we never have a website that just has text. Usually we have websites that are styled and look really nice and have different colors. So we're not going to do anything super fancy, but what we're going to do is going to add some CSS around this text and try and make it look maybe a little nicer. So we'll minimize our browser again, and we're going to go to our source folder here and just click on, left click on it, and then right click, and then new folder. And we're going to do styles, or sorry, assets. And then another new folder, we're going to call it styles. And then we'll right click on styles and do new file, styles.css. Then I'm going to go ahead and type out some CSS for this, and again then I'll review once I'm done adding everything to this file, the contents of it, so that we can understand it. Okay, so now I've got this all typed out, I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'll go over this. So the first part here is just telling the browser that we want the HTML and the body of the HTML to have a height of 100% and a width of 100%, so it takes up all of the screen real estate that it can. And then we're setting the font family for everything in the browser to sans serif. And then we're saying here that we want all div elements to have a background color of gray, a foreground color of white smoke, a border radius of 10 pixels, which creates a rounding of the edges instead of a box. So rather than hard edges at 90 degrees, this just rounds them off. And then we're doing a width of 50% and text align center and margin auto. These three things kind of together allow us to center the element on the page, which we'll kind of see here in a moment. So now I'm going to move to the index file again, and we're going to import our CSS file. So we'll do that is just import, and then assets, styles, and styles.css. And in case you haven't seen it in some cases, you're going to see, I'll go back here a little bit, if I type these up, you'll see this, what's called IntelliSense will pop up, and it will show you folders or methods or functions that it's guessing that you're probably wanting. So sometimes you might see this populate really fast for me, because what I'm doing is I'm showing this, if I type these first two parts in, I can actually hit tab and it will autofill that in for me, and then again I can hit tab again here for me so that it will fill those things out faster. So you're welcome to use that functionality if you want to. And so this will import our CSS, and all we need to do now is save it, and we can see that we have a small error here saying that we need an appropriate loader for this file, because now it's trying to run the CSS, but we haven't told Webpack how it can process that. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to hit Control C, and then this little terminate batch job will come up here on the screen, and we just want to hit Y and then hit Enter, so that we can get back into our command prompt here, and we're going to install some more dev dependencies. So we're going to do npm install save dev again, and then we're going to do css loader and style loader, and then we'll come back when those are done. Okay, so now that those are installed, we can go over to the package.json and verify CS loader and style loader are there. And what we need to do now is provide the configuration into Webpack and tell it how to process those files. So we're going to come over here, and under our dev server, we're going to add a module and then add in our comma here. And I'll fill this out and kind of review it afterwards. Okay, so now I've got it all filled out. Again, I added this module property here along with the rules, and then a file matching parameter here. This is called regex. I'll have links for that below so you can kind of look up what that is. But basically this is just telling it to process this rule for everything with the CSS file extension. And then we're telling it to use the style loader first and the CSS loader secondary. And then we're just adding this resolve here and telling it to resolve against JSON or JavaScript files. And then we can go ahead and save this and go back down here and type in npm run start again. And now you can see it's opened up our browser here. And so we had the old one here with just hello world and nothing. And now we have this div element that has a gray background and white foreground. And it's got these rounded edges as we talked about earlier, and everything's centered here on the page. And now we've just used CSS to style our page. And you can play around with this and add other CSS as you want, and then just save it to see the changes updated.
So here's my thoughts on Webpack as a module bundler in general. First, it's arguably one of the most popular module bundlers out there, so it's got a lot of support behind it. Two, their documentation is pretty solid, and it makes getting a project up and running pretty simple because their configuration is fairly intuitive. Three, what makes Webpack also really good is its flexibility, because there's a lot of plugins that different developers create for Webpack that make it pretty extensible for different features and different project types that you might want to use. In general, I'd say you can't really go wrong if you're choosing Webpack as your module bundler for your project. Hopefully this video helped you get started on making your first website, or maybe you just learned a little something extra today. Let me know in the comments section below. And I told you earlier I'd tell you if Webpack was my favorite module bundler, and sadly the answer is no. If you want to find out what my favorite module bundler is, stay tuned for the next video. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Whether you're new to web development, new to Webpack, just trying to, scripts, they help.